the Swedish offshore wind market, which I think from the perspective of from the UK supply chain is somewhat of an unknown market with a lot of interesting and exciting developments that have been occurring over the last couple of years. And obviously we look forward to the coming decade to see, where this market takes us and what the final outcome would be of Sweden's offshore wind industry. So by way of introduction, my name is Daniel Taylor. I work at the commercial team here at the British Embassy in Stockholm. Our team is responsible for the promotion and strengthening of the relationship between Sweden and the UK through trade and investment. Again, if you're a UK company interested in the Swedish market, please feel free to contact me directly and see how we might be able to support you. So today we're going to be covering Sweden's offshore wind market, unique approach, I would say, to offshore wind, and some of the latest developments will be covered. As I said, there's been like a really exciting flurry of new projects that have been announced in the past few years, and many private actors are looking to untap this the huge potential in Sweden for offshore wind. Obviously, demand for green electricity, that's going to be key for the electrification of society. And in Sweden, there's some really exciting green industry and industrial decarbonisation projects that you might have heard of, such as the Green Steel Hybrid project, Northvolt battery production, and then of course general electrification of industrial processes. Very grateful to our speakers for joining us today. First on the agenda, we're going to hear from Lena Kinning from the Swedish Wind Energy Association. Lena is going to provide us with some broader insights into how the market operates and a general overview of the offshore wind pipeline. Before we hear from some developers that you might not be aware of from the UK, so we've got Daniel from Eolus Wind, who's going to talk a little bit about Eolus Wind and some of their projects in Sweden, and perhaps also touch on what they're up to in the region. And then Emily from OX2 will also do the same. After that, then we're going to have some time for questions after the presentation. So please do post some questions in the chat. And a very quick reminder on housekeeping. I think we're all used to using Teams now, but please respect the speakers by keeping off your mic and video during the presentations. And just to let you know that we'll also be recording the session. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Lena to kick us off with the presentations. Lena, over to you.
Thank you so much, and good morning to you all. We really have a snowy weather here today, so it doesn't look as good as my background. We'll see. I'll try to share my screen here with you so we can start. And while I'm presenting, I won't be able to see you, so I can't see if you raise any hands. So Daniel, do we take questions afterwards, or do we take it during the presentation?
We'll take questions after all the presentations.
Great. Okay, I kick off then. But thank you so much for the opportunity to let me speak about the Swedish offshore wind market here. My name is Lena Kinning, and I work at the Swedish Wind Energy Association here in Sweden. And that is a trade organization for companies working with wind power in the whole value chain. We represent both on and offshore wind power, and we might be a very small team of 6 employees here, but we have over 140 very strong member companies, and that is all from wind power producers to energy intense industry that covers the whole value chain. Actually, we have suppliers, developers, landowners, as well as industry companies that is in need of the electricity, and also some financing companies as well. So we cover the whole value chain here. But first, to set the scene before we talk about the offshore market specifically, I want to say some words about the electricity system in Sweden, how it looked like. The electricity system is mainly hydropower and nuclear power here, with, as you see, wind power coming in the last 10 years as a larger share. We also have quite a large share of bioenergy in the combined heat and power. The electricity is what we call fossil free now in Sweden, that we don't have any fossil energy in the electricity production, which is something that is quite pushed for in the EU right now. The black line represent the electricity use, as you can see, it has been quite stable for the last 10 years or so, or even a bit longer. We produce more electricity than we use. So Sweden is a net exporter of electricity and has been so for the last couple of years as well. And we use about between 140-ish terawatt hours of electricity annually, and produce about 160 terawatt hours annually, and that has been quite stable. And the build out, you can see just here the installed electricity generation capacity. The build out of wind power has been really kicked off the last 10 years, and is still growing. But you should know that it's onshore installations mainly. We haven't built any offshore wind in Sweden for the last 10 years. And even if we were in the front line of the offshore wind 10 years ago, there has been no build outs since then, and I'll come back to that a bit later. And you can also see from our newly published short-term forecast that the build-out of the onshore wind is still growing. After 2025, though, we see a slight decrease in the number of permits for onshore wind as well, and I'll come back to that as well later. Even if the electricity demand has been quite stable, historically, we see a strong increase in electricity demand, as Daniel mentioned, with the electrification of the industry sector and the transport sector mainly. Because even if the electricity system itself is almost fossil-free here, we don't have a fossil-free energy system. So new electricity and new green electricity is needed to cover the decarbonization of the industry, of the current industry and the transport sector, but also the new established industry. And I'm apologizing for the Swedish legend here in the image. The gray area represent transports. The purple one is already existing industry. The dark blue is new establishments, and that's mainly industry that established in Sweden because of the access to green energy, such as battery factories, new steel industry, and other hydrogen-intense industries, such as maritime fuel factories, and so on. And the orange bar is the hydrogen production. So you see a lot of the new electricity, the increase in electricity demand is in hydrogen production. And this is from a study that we made a couple of years ago in 2021, but several studies is showing the same trend. At least a double electricity system until 2050 is foreseen in Sweden, mainly driven by industry demands, and not so much taking out the fossil from the electricity system, but the energy system as a whole. So it's decreasing emissions and to keep and secure competitiveness in the industry that is the main driving force for this big electricity demand. So why build wind power here in Sweden, one might ask? Well, we have unique conditions here with large areas and, as you know, low population density. I don't know if that has to do with the snow or not. We have a very long and shallow coastline, which is perfect for the offshore wind. And we also have very good wind conditions here. And in our system, even though we might need more power sources, and that is highly debated in the Swedish policy debates right now, if we're going to do wind power or nuclear power, increase the nuclear power, it is only wind power that can be developed quickly enough to meet these increasing electricity demands, since the timelines for building new nuclear is so much longer than for new wind power. So that's as a motive for building out the wind power. And it has also been shown that wind power delivers green electricity as the lowest costs. And that is also, it is also shown that the new wind power has also pushed down the electricity prices in Sweden. And we saw last year in 2022 that Sweden actually had the lowest spot prices on electricity in the whole European Union, which is something that is also the reason for attracting all the electricity-intense industries to Sweden. But now to the offshore wind power. That was a little bit of background on why it's so far it's an unused resource here. It has been very beneficial to build the onshore wind power in Sweden, and it still is. And as I mentioned, we haven't built any offshore wind power in 10 years' time, although we have these very good conditions. And one might wonder why, but there are several reasons for it. And one might be that we have the same market-based, developer-driven system offshore and onshore in Sweden, and that is combined with the fact that we had an electricity green certificate system, a support scheme for building out renewable power that promoted the cheapest source of power. It was mainly onshore wind that was built out. So that is one reason. It is so it has been cheaper mainly to build onshore. We haven't had any specific targets for or goals for the offshore wind in Sweden, and we still don't actually, and I'll come back to that. We don't have auctions or tenders or anything like that. And since the green electricity certificate system is taken down now, we don't have any subsidies or support schemes for either onshore or offshore wind here. So we have this market-based developer-driven system, and the reason for it for the big kickoff now in commercial interest in offshore wind is basically because of this large electricity demand onwards, and it has been also become a bit more difficult to build onshore wind in Sweden, and we see like there will be room for both more onshore wind and a lot of more offshore wind as well. No targets, I said. Well, we have the maritime spatial plans that is revised and upcoming revision with 27 gigawatts, that equals around 120 terawatt hours. I think it's in the assignment. It's going to be included in the maritime spatial plans, but that's a good indication for what the government wants, but it's not something that will be like assigned to a specific site or anything. It's just like a target for in the plans for where it's suitable to build the offshore wind. But all this, it sounds like the conditions are a bit different from rest of Europe, and it is. And since we don't have any limits from where to build or any limits on where the government says we can only build on these places and at a specific time, we have a very large commercial interest in offshore wind in Sweden in the moment, as Daniel mentioned in the beginning as well. As it is now, we have around 60 different projects going on in different phases around the Swedish coast, and we have I have a map there over Sweden, to the right in the picture, with all the different projects plotted out. And as you see, it's all around the coast, from the far north to the south, although the most mature projects are situated in the south of Sweden at the moment. We have somewhat different legislation in the territorial waters and in the economic zone, where in the territorial waters we have the same legislative process as for onshore wind, and there we have something that that is called a municipality veto, where municipalities can say no to wind power before it's even tried in court. So therefore, I guess 80% of the commercial interests of the projects are located in the economic zone. And as in the rest of Europe, the permits are Sorry? Okay, I continue. As in the rest of Europe, the permits are the largest bottleneck for progress in these projects. And this is from our last project portfolio statistics that were released last week. As you see, we have no offshore park under construction and no park is announced. And by that we mean a park that has gotten both investment decision and permits. And we have one park that has gotten their permits now from the government, and that is the Swedish part of the Kriegers Flak that is already built on the Danish side. So that is what is going on at the moment. However, the project portfolio with projects under permit review looks a little bit different. We have almost 19 gigawatts of capacity right now under permit review, which is which can give quite, if all these projects were given permits, it could give quite a lot of those of the increased electricity demand that is needed for the industry transition. And as you see further down the pipeline, that we have early stage projects and projects under consultation that is preparing for their to send in the permit applications. The offshore by far outreach the onshore projects as it is now. So the commercial interest in this market is very, very large. And so it will be very interesting to see how this new government that we have is working with the permit processes, because that will be the crucial part of it for it onwards. And since so much of the additional electricity demand comes from the industry transition, we see an increasing trend in collaboration projects between the industry and the wind power developers. So they can combine and join forces in the quite difficult permit processes onwards. And all the ones of you who have followed the latest developments in the Europe electricity market design review also know that it will be a big focus on long-term collaboration and long-term contracts. So this, I think, we'll see more of in the future. And here we see just some few examples. We have OX2 that we'll hear Emily later, who collaborates with a big cement factory or a cement company. And Vattenfall, as I mentioned before with the Kriegers Flak, they they are collaborating with the chemical industry Preem, and Ørsted, which is of course another big developer, is collaborating with a company called Liquid Wind, who is making. We're going to build factories to build fuel for the maritime sector in Sweden. And just to finish my presentation, I would like to say a word about our upcoming conference in Stockholm in October. Upcoming, but anyway, just to save the date for our big conference wind conference in Stockholm. That will be both onshore and offshore, and it's the meeting place for the wind power industry in Sweden. So just keep that date in mind, and looking on our webpage to see how you can participate as an exhibit, but mostly network on this conference. And with that, I'll say thank you so much. And if you have any questions, we can take it afterwards, or you can reach out to me on this email address.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Lena. Tom, we'll revisit your question after the presentations. Yeah, I can just also back up what Lena said about the Wind conference in October. If you're remotely interested in what's happening in Sweden, both onshore and offshore, I think it's a really great conference to come along to. Relatively inexpensive to attend as well, and really excellent networking opportunity, especially if you're possibly working with both onshore and offshore clients and customers. And with that, we'll jump straight into the next presentation. I see we've got Daniel's been able to join us. So Daniel, if you want to share your screen.
Yes.
I see in the chat a couple of people have had issues seeing the shared screen. I haven't myself, and a couple of others I've checked with have been able to see. So hopefully the vast majority of you can see Daniel's screen now. And there will be a recording as well sent around afterwards, so you will be able to see it. So over to you, Daniel.
Yep. Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Yep. Great. Yeah. And first of all, I want to say thanks to Daniel and his colleagues for inviting me to present a little bit about Eolus and our portfolio. I also want to apologize. I've been having a cold last couple of days, so hopefully my voice will last the whole presentation. And yeah, this is me. I am Daniel Bergvall, work as a project manager within Offshore Wind at Eolus. I have been at Eolus for 3 years. Background in environmental science, and then studied wind power project management, and then continued the web venture into offshore wind at Eolus. A little bit short about Eolus. It's a Swedish company founded in 1990, and it was founded as the first commercial wind power developer in Sweden. And the main market is that, or business is that we develop, construct, and manage assets for renewable energy. So not only wind. We have established approximately 15% of all wind power in Sweden. A bit more than 100 employees. We are growing quite fast, so we might even be well above 100 now. And our main market is the Nordic countries, the Baltic, Poland, and the US. Yeah, as I said, so we are a developer of renewable energy in the Nordics and beyond. Our share is listed on the Stockholm Exchange, and we have about 37,000 shareholders. We have erected more than 660 wind turbines. We have an asset management company that is managing assets for our clients, and the portfolio is about 1.5 gigawatts. And we have a development portfolio of 21, almost 22 gigawatts. And a little bit about the portfolio more in general. So we have the portfolio of almost 22 gigawatts, and it's spread across all markets and technologies. Our main market is still Sweden. Then we have a large chunk in the US as well, mostly solar. And I don't need to dig into. We recently, due to the size of offshore, we now have the biggest share of our portfolio is obviously offshore. It grows quite quick with more projects. And you can also see the portfolio by market and technology side. And for the rest of the presentation, I'm going to focus on our Swedish portfolio for offshore wind. But we have offshore projects in more or less all the markets we are or looking into. But I'm also obviously only gonna describe the projects that are publicly known, so to say. Yes, so this is a map of the locations of our current projects that we are developing. We have West Wind outside Gothenburg. We have Holland, which is located in Öresund, just between Malmö and Copenhagen. Arkeona, which is located south of Scania. We have a very old project that some people might actually know. It's Bleking Offshore. It's been in development since I think before 2010. It was a very early project, and it was developed by us together with other partners. And then we have Najaderna, which is outside Gävle, north of Stockholm. And then we have two projects in a collaboration with with Simple Blue under the name Sea Sapphire, which is outside of Gotland. So the West Wind project, it's as I said, located outside Gothenburg, and there is a massive demand for new renewable energy from the industries. And we see this project as a really good project that has the opportunity to support the green industrial expansion in the region. And we have very strong support from the local and regional industries that want to either change their business models or their processes, or new establishments and expansion in the region. We have a grid connection that is planned for either Stenungsund or Hisingen. Hisingen is just in the central of Gothenburg. And that is also where we have the most interest to connect, I would say. And alternatively, there might be that we connect the park to an offshore hub indicated or designated by the Swedish TSO, but that is an ongoing process. We have performed preliminary geophysical and geotechnical surveys, and project is planned to be constructed with monopiles and/or jackets. And the EAS process is and preparations for the permit applications is ongoing. And then we have some key figures, 1,000 megawatts, and COD is estimated to 2028 to 2029. Then we have the project Holland, which is the one that I'm actually the project manager for. It's a nearshore project in Öresund. EIA is in the final phases, and we are preparing for submission of the permit application. And one of the reasons this project is very good, it's that it's very close to existing grid infrastructure, close to Barsebäck, where we used to have a nuclear power plant that got closed, I think it was 10 or 15 years ago. So we have a very cheap grid connection for this project, which will make it more feasible as we see it. And due to the short instance, we also have the possibility to establish the wind farm without an offshore substation. So we will lead the inter-array cables directly onshore. We have performed the geophysical and geotechnical surveys, the phase 1, as I normally call it, so the pre-permit surveys. And the scope is that it's up to 23 turbines, 15 megawatts, and we will install it on gravity-based foundations since the water depth is rather shallow, and we also have very hard bedrock with limestone 1 to 3 meters below seabed. Yeah, as I said, so the electricity production is just where it's needed. We have very massive consumption in this region, and the southern part of Sweden specifically have very low low share of production of electricity. So it will be a project that massively can help the situation. And then also we have for this project we have received a positive indication from the Swedish Defence Force, which is rather uncommon for Swedish projects. And COD we see as 2027, 2028. Then we have Alciona, and that is located south of Trelleborg and Ystad on the south coast. Grid connection will either be assigned to an offshore point if that is indicated or designated by the TSO, or we will connect it to the regional or transmission grid. And they're also worth noting is that there are several plans for hydrogen production in the region, and just as for the other project, it's massive demand for renewable energy in this region. There are some challenges with these projects that the onshore grid in the region is not really designed for these kind of capacities. So there will be a lot of collaboration perhaps between developers and different projects and also with the TSO. And we have performed service and investigations, and the EIA is in the final stages and preparation for application is ongoing. And this project we see monopiles or jacket and COD in the later part of this decade. Then we have the old project, Bleking Offshore. It's a nearshore project in Hane Bay, 20 kilometers from existing grid infrastructure, where we have the oil-fired power station that's been debated a lot in Sweden. That burned a lot of oil during, since the gas prices went up. They have used that power plant a lot. And this project is also very interesting due to the very strong support from local communities and politicians. We see a lot in Sweden that municipalities, for instance, are a bit more a bit more skeptical. But for this project, we have very big support from the local politicians. And we had a permit application process between 2012 2016, where the environmental court recommended the government to accept the project, but it was denied due to defense forces and their interests. And we have been using the previous studies for the project and updated them in order to make a new EIA for the project. So we have a lot of information from a long period of time. And then we also redesigned the technical envelope due to the technical development that actually have been that you are all aware of since 2010. So it's a totally different layout and turbine size that is planned now. It's also relatively shallow water, so 10 to 40 meters, and hard bedrock a few meters below seabed. So we are also looking into gravity-based foundations for this project. And we are planning to do some supplementary geotechnical and geophysical surveys during this year, given that we received necessary permits for that. And also COD in the end of the decade. Then we have the Najarna project, and that is north of Stockholm and outside Gävle, very close to consumption and industry, close to one of the major hydrogen valleys that are discussed in Sweden. And we have a grid connection that is planned for either in an offshore hub provided by the TSO or we have several different locations that we are looking into on the coast. And the water depth is 25 to 60, and we are looking into bottom fixed foundations. And we are also, for this project, planning to do the geotechnical geophysical surveys during 2023, and we are already performing environmental and marine surveys. And as well, for this project, we have the EIA process ongoing, and permit application for this project is in the second half of 2023. Then we have, since I think during Wind, I see in the chat that so during Wind last year, the conference in Stockholm, we announced that we have a joint venture together with Simple Brew Group, that where we co-develop offshore floating projects in the Baltic Sea, and mainly in Sweden and Finland. We have 4 projects, of which one is undisclosed, and we have 2 projects in Sweden. And then, so these projects are Hercules, which is a floating wind project southeast of Gotland, and where we have the consultation process ongoing, and we are in the EIA process, so we are conducting surveys and investigations. And we have an installed capacity for this project of about 2.5 gigawatts, and COD after 2030. And then we have Skidbladno, which is north of Gotland, also a floating project, installed capacity of 2.2 gigawatts, and we are in the phase of service and investigations for EIA, and the consultation process is also ongoing. And then I put together one slide of just a bit of the surveys that services that we could need for our projects, and that is I have divided them into the permit and consent phase, and also the detailed design, which is more like pre-feed and feed. So in the permit and consent phase, we could need help in environmental service investigations, conceptual technical design, grid studies, EIA, modeling and assessments of environmental impacts, birds, for instance, and also geotechnical geophysical surveys. For the later phase, so post-permit or during permit handling, I would say technical engineering surveys, wind and metocean measurements, foundation designs, installation and O&M planning, project optimizations. Detailed surveys will be probably after permit, and also some financial calculations and procurement support, I would say. Yes, thank you so much, and happy to answer any questions after the last presentation. I saw that there was some questions already, so I will try to prepare some answers. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you, Daniel. You got through a lot there in well, I think it was about 18 minutes, so well done. And we'll jump straight into the next presentation from Emily from OX2, and then we'll, as I said, we'll run through some questions and pick some out to go through afterwards. So over to you, Emily.
Thank you, Daniel, and thank you for having me and come talk to you about OX2 and the exciting journey we are embarking on in the Baltic Sea. I hope you all can see my presentation.
Yes.
I'll take that as a yes. So my name is Emily Zachrisson, and I head the offshore wind development at OX2 in Sweden. And we have a vision to accelerate the access to renewable energy. OX2 was previously an onshore developer mainly based in Sweden and Finland. I think we have a journey that pretty much resembles Eolus. And we started working in offshore in about 2018, 2019, started to screen the waters of Sweden to see where could a developer like OX2 fit. Because as Lina was telling you, the Swedish market, it's a developer-driven market. It's completely merchant, and we don't have a centralized system for appointing where we should develop our projects, which makes it a lot more fun, to be honest. And then there's also a lot more competition, also in the permitting phase. So OX2, we are today working with both onshore and offshore wind, PV, and energy storage projects, and we are one of the leading developers within renewable energy in Europe, where onshore wind has been and is still basically the cash cow and our main business. We went over the last 2 years from being a privately held company to being listed on the Nasdaq Stockholm Stock Exchange, and today have a market cap about 22 billion SEK, which if you divide it by 10, you pretty much get it in euros, so you get a feeling for the size of it. We have a portfolio of about 38 gigawatt, which consists of both development projects within the 4 areas. We have projects which are in construction, and then we have projects which we manage for our customers. So basically, our business philosophy is to develop, construct, and then sell off our assets, and then also take care of the assets for the different owners during the operational phase. So from previously being mainly based in Sweden and Finland, we have moved into Europe, and basically the Southern Europe, and where the business is pretty much within onshore wind and PV projects. The company was founded in 2004, and we've had, up until now, I think we've constructed about 3.5 gigawatts of renewable energy, and we keep building on top of that. And today the development portfolio is about 32 gigawatts. We're also approaching about 400 employees, so we're still a pretty small company if you compare it to the big giants, but that also makes us fast in the markets where we are active. Our offshore wind developments are in Sweden, Finland, and Åland. And Åland is islands between Sweden and Finland, which belong to Finland, but they have their own legislation to about 90%. So we see it as like a country, because it's basically an old market. And those 3 markets were basically where we were strong from before. And so we started digging in these and building our offshore portfolio. And as I said, we started in 2018, which gave us a bit of a head start compared to when a lot of the other developers started joining the markets a few years later. We today have in the communicated portfolio 18.3 gigawatts across 7 projects. We have a few more projects that are out under consultation rounds right now, and might be added to the portfolio at a later stage. We're also very pleased that we, during last year, divested 49% on 3 of our projects to Inca Investments. So now we are co-developing these 3 projects together with Inca Investments. And if you don't know Inca Investments, it's part of the IKEA group. Our projects in the Baltic Sea consists of these here on the map, and they're just but we see the Baltic Sea region as it has significant potential for offshore wind. Water depths are pretty moderate. Wind speeds are okay. It's not North Sea, but still they're favorable. And we see that we as a company can drive a lot of value through being having high speed, building the right competence base, and also being very flexible in our business and financing models, whereas some of the bigger giants are more fixed into their own structures. We also see that farming down parts of the ownership on our projects in last year was a good way to diversify, and also a necessary to continue to develop our ambitious pipeline, because it is ambitious, being nearly 20 gigawatts, given the size of the company that we are. And I won't take you through all of these projects. I'll just give you a flavor on some of the most advanced projects and where we are on those projects as of now. And the most advanced project is the Galatea-Galene project. It's off the west coast of Sweden, outside the cities of Falkenberg and Varberg, and pretty close to the Anholt wind farm that some of you may know. It's 1.7 gigawatts in size, or up to 1.7 gigawatts in size, and we chose this area because water depths are around 40 meters. There's a close proximity to the grid because we have one of our nuclear power plants located just north of the city of Varberg. We are foreseeing to construct this project on monopile foundations, and we were very happy when we last quarter were given a green light on our Swedish economic zone license by the County Administrative Board in Halland, and we also obtained a Natura 2000 permit. So on the permitting side, we're just waiting for a governmental go on these projects. We believe that partnerships are very important in developing our projects for the future. So on this project, we're working closely with Falkenberg Harbor and how they could help this project happen. And we're also working with Cobb and Nordic Sea Farm, which they actually grow kelp. So we're looking to a possibility for aquaculture within our wind farm. Because I think like partnerships is the new kind of leadership. So kelp farming could be a way to stand out because Sweden has a highly competitive offshore wind market. Our other project, Triton, is located south of Skåne. It's about 1.8 gigawatts, and we target an offshore installation starting in 28 or 29. Also, this project has about 40 to 45 meters of water depth. It's targeted to be on monopiles, and we have applied for the necessary permits about a year and a half ago, and we expect a decision on this during the next quarter. We also have another big project, and I know that caught a lot of media attention, the Aurora project, which is 5.5 gigawatts of capacity spread over 1,000 kilometer big area. And on this project, we are targeting both monopiles, jackets, and floating foundations, given the size and given that the water depths vary within the site. At OX2, we believe that we need to have big visions and big ambitions to take us into the future. And it's by believing on this that we really can change the world. So I just want to pinpoint some of the projects that we have ongoing in the Baltic Sea. I know this is for the Swedish market, but the Swedish water, it comes over and it becomes the Åland waters, and it's still one sea. So we have a project, the Baltic Sea Hydrogen Collector, together with CIP, Gasgrid Finland, and Nordian, where we're investigating if we could build a hydrogen backbone from Sweden and the islands of Åland, passing through the Baltic Sea and down to Germany, and also how that could make use of all the wind farms that are being planned by both us at OX2, but also by other developers in the Baltic Sea region. On the island of Åland, we're investigating an e-fuel hub in the port of Långnäs, together with Ålandsbanken and the Maersk McKinney Møller Center for Zero Carbon Shipping. Also working with some of the ferries that traffic the Åland Islands. And Lina previously mentioned that there's also the energy hub on Gotland, where we're working with Cementa and some other undisclosed parties on making this happen. So my message to you is come and join us in our green revolution. A lot is going to happen in the Baltic Sea, in both the Swedish markets, but also our neighboring countries. And I want to thank you very much for listening, and very welcome to reach out to me if you have any questions.
Brilliant. Thank you, Emily. Some really, I mean, just discover some of those projects, and then also, yeah, how it fits into the broader kind of industrial or decarbonization of industry in Sweden is really, really exciting and inspiring. And I think that's something, as a Brit living in Sweden, my one of my reflections is that the Swedes are very good at sort of different industries working together to reach a common goal. And I think that's something I think maybe a lot of countries can learn from, instead of different industrial actors operating in silos. So we'll jump into the questions that have come in on the chat. And we've got a little bit of time. We'll run till 1:15. So one of the first questions that came in was with regards to the permitting process, which is not straightforward. So maybe I don't know if Lena, do you want to take that one to start with, and maybe if Daniel and Emily want to chip in from a developer perspective.
I can start, and then I happily get help from you. Let me share an image. I have that in Swedish, so but I'll talk you through it just to get a little bit of explanation. It's easier to explain with the image. So in the permit process is not really straightforward. We don't have a specific legislation designed for offshore wind. And we have different legislation depending on if it's in near shore or in the economic zone. And as I briefly mentioned, in near shore you have the municipality veto, and then you apply for a permit in a specific court. But you also need a variety of different permits. It's not only one permit. And the same goes for the economic zone. You have at least 4 big permits that you need to get, and it's not straightforward. The order is quite straightforward. Some of them overlap. So I won't go into detail on this, but if you have detailed question on it, I think I can try to explain bilateral. But in the economic zone, it's the government who have the final say, even though other authorities have other permits to give in the process. So it's actually quite. We usually say, in Sweden, we have a system for things, but in this case, it's not that straightforward. But
I think just to amend to Luna's comments, I mean, Sweden hasn't, we don't have a legislation for offshore wind, but we basically don't have a legislation for anything offshore because we haven't had anything happening offshore. We don't have any oil and gas. There are a few pipelines and cables, but other than that, the legislation is not really suitable for having operations within our waters. And I think it makes it more complex, but it also makes it possible for players like Eolus or OX2 to actually navigate in this complex environment, whereas some of the bigger giants maybe find it more troublesome.
Exactly, and we also know that the government is trying to coordinate these different permits and try to see how the system can be optimized. And there was a question also about the timeline from a project start to project ending, and maybe Emily and Daniel might have more insights on that, because we haven't reached goal, right, for any projects so far.
No, and I think it's probably difficult to say, as in all countries, how long will permitting take, and when will you get the permits? I think the push from around the world that is happening now will make it faster than it has been historically. And I think both Daniel and I provided when we think we will be into installation or COD.
And in addition to that, we also have the industries the electricity demand from the industry is increasing now and even before 2030. So there is also a motive for the government to try to push for faster permits, as well as permits are the largest bottleneck for the build out here.
And then thanks for the feedback there, Lena, and for the clarification. And great that you had a slide to hand there. And then another question we had was around integration to the grid and build out essentially to the territorial waters. And I know the Swedish TSO received some instruction, which seemed to maybe have been put on hold or even retreated somewhat. So do you want to touch on that? You know, maybe it'd be great if we did a follow-up session in a couple of months, and maybe could try and get the TSO to present a little bit what their plans are. But for now, I don't know. Lena, would you be the best to answer this one?
Yeah, I can start, and then Emily and Daniel can fill in on it. There's no coordinated process between TSO and the other permits, but the Swedish TSO is working on how to handle all these new offshore wind farms being connected. And as I think both Emily and Daniel mentioned that we have had nuclear power plants being torn down. And in those, there the infrastructure is already built. So in some places it might be more easy to connect to the grid onshore. But the TSO is working on it, and they also know that the offshore wind is what we can deliver to the energy system quickest possible. So, Emily and Daniel, do you have any add-ons to that?
Yeah, I mean, what I wrote down as some input to it is that we have different processes. So we have either, I mean, there's still opportunity to connect to the regional grid, given that if there's available capacity, and that can be done pretty much by the developer, initiated by themselves. So then we don't have the massive lead times. Historically, the TSO has very long lead times for permitting, which they are now discussing how to cut down. Because if you look at the average, I think a couple of years ago, I think they said 12 years, and then we are way past 2030. So there are a lot of challenges, but I mean, I think most developers now are looking at what is the available capacity and what opportunities are there to use the existing grid infrastructure and then to develop that further. And then we have obviously the other route to markets with hydrogen production and these kind of things in the industry. So, I mean, it gets... I think from a developer perspective, it's about being creative and find solutions. Because the national system, it's we have a different directives to the TSO, and it goes back and forward, and we don't really know what the outcome will be. But
And another question is around Daniel, you touched on it on one of your projects in terms of support or engagement with the Swedish armed forces. And I mean, we don't need to touch on whether Sweden becomes a member of NATO or when Sweden will become a member of NATO. But in terms of that relationship with the armed forces, I know it's been a tricky one to navigate from a developer's perspective compared to the situation in the UK. Do you want to leave any comment there, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's difficult because, I mean, I think the Defense Force or Swedish Armed Forces, they would like to help, but it's very difficult. And obviously, I mean, what we have today is either no or yes, and there is a big scale on no's to yes in reality. So, I mean, given that you have normally the Defense Force in Sweden, the way it works is that they look at the existing technologies or systems they have, and then you propose a wind farm, and obviously it's going to be an impact, and then it's going to be a no. But I mean, when we had the first for this specific project, the environmental court actually said we cannot see that it's an unrealistic impact if you build this wind farm. And that was on the government's table for 3 or almost 4 years, I think. And then they accepted some onshore projects which the Defence Force said no to, and they killed the Blekinge offshore project, which is very unfortunate because then we would have probably a gigawatt of wind in the southern parts of Sweden by now when we need it the most. So it's unfortunate, but we are working a lot with local authorities, the regions that are supporting the build out and building a bigger network in order to discuss with the Defence Force, which will also, I mean, we are in dialogue with them, but obviously it needs to come to technical solutions and providing or suggesting this to them. But I think they are a bit overwhelmed as well, but with all the new projects that came out of nowhere, and all of a sudden, if they need to handle all this, I mean, they didn't have the resources for it either. So hopefully it's going to be having some progress. I don't know if you want to comment as well, Emily.
Well, I mean, if you compare to the UK market when that was building up, and I was fortunate to work in that, then, I mean, they had the same obstacles that we have in Sweden now. So I think it's about everybody finding their place in the game and who's supposed to be doing what. And also the general need for these projects, which has increased over the last years.
I think it's also a question of finding a process for dialogue with the Defence Force, because they might be overwhelmed with a number of projects, and they might be more inclined to discuss different technical solutions if they know what projects are going to take place or not. So and as it is now, it's very many projects, and you get like the exclusive right quite late in the process, and that's something that they want. They want a more centralized system, but for their purposes. But that's not what the rest of the society, like in Sweden, have. We don't have that centralized system, so we need to find a way to work with dialogue without the centralized system, and that's, I think, it's a challenge right now.
Yeah, I think from the UK perspective, it was under the Prime Ministership of Gordon Brown. I think he actually said that, you know, the Defence Forces and the industry actually need to sit down together and make this happen. And I think, you know, maybe that's the kind of directive that that you need to bring everybody to the table. And then we've got a question around local competence and local content. You know, we're seeing that obviously in different markets, there's different demands placed on developers that are coming in to have X amount of local content, obviously contributing to local jobs, etc. I'm not aware of anything like this in Sweden, as you know, there's no kind of top-down model. So I guess it's I'll hand the question over to you, but I'm guessing it's more about bringing local people on side to support those projects, obviously.
Yeah, we won't have any like criteria in auctions for it, and it's not in legislation, so it's more of a trying to get acceptance and to bond with the society.
And then I did see general gaps in the supply chain. Obviously, you know, with Sweden not having any offshore, well, some offshore wind experience, but you know, the neighbors in Denmark and Germany obviously having considerable amounts of expertise, in the UK, you know, where are those gaps in the supply chain? Daniel, you very it was very useful and helpful of you to share kind of like where you see the needs at this stage, a lot within the kind of geotechnical consenting phase, but I guess general gaps in the supply chain from your perspective as developers, where do Where do you see those gaps being filled?
I would say, I mean, when the first projects start, when they are in the FID, I know that we have the permitted one that is awaiting the Vattenfall project, and they are talking, but we don't know if they are taking the FID. We have harbors that are starting to have a bit more interest. Me and Emily actually were at the event last week where they start to develop it, but obviously the issue is still that the ports would like to have a project before they develop, and it's a bit chicken and egg. And if you ask, I mean, I think for the first project, we will most likely in Sweden use the already established ports in Denmark or in the Baltic Sea. And then as we go, obviously we can develop more of a supply chain locally.
Yeah, I agree with Daniel on that. I think harbors is one of the bottlenecks, but at the same time, we have the proximity to other strong countries that we can also use. I mean, Denmark and Germany is just from where Daniel and I sit in southern Sweden, it's very close. So, and we're using international consultants on all our projects already to bring in the expertise to Sweden. And then we have some strong Swedish players on the market, like NKT on the cable side and Hitachi Power Grids, I think is their name nowadays.
Yeah.
But I think what is important for Sweden is to have a lower electricity price because we have a lot of energy intense industry, and that's maybe how we see the benefit from these projects, and not always on the manufacturing.
And if I may add on that, also a lot of this industry is also, you mentioned NKT and Hitachi, but also we have industry that are providing other countries with, for example, SKF with and other industry that
like lower tier suppliers, basically.
Exactly, that has supplied other industries before, and now can switch to the offshore industry globally. So that is also a benefit for developing the market.
And obviously the likes of Vattenfall that have developed a lot of competence outside of Sweden, in the UK and the Netherlands on the offshore wind projects. I don't see any more questions in the chat, apart from the standard one about will the presentations be shared, so you'll receive a link to the recording of this session. And then I would just like to say thank you, well, for everybody for joining and tuning in, and then a huge thank you to Lena, Emily, and Daniel. One last question just came in from Matthew. Local stakeholder reaction to the build out or potential build out of offshore projects, and I guess this comes down to like local acceptance.
From my personal view, I think the local acceptance has changed a lot over just the last year. We've seen electricity prices soaring, even if they haven't soared in Sweden the same way as they have in other countries. I think it's changed people's awareness to another extent. I think in terms of fishery, we don't have the same strong fishery industry as you do in, for example, the UK. The Baltic Sea is in a pretty bad state, so there's basically not very many fish to fish for. So. But that was my view. I don't know if Lena and Daniel have other views.
Yeah, but I agree with you, and but overall we have like this kind of consensus culture in Sweden where we try to discuss two coexisting solutions, and I think even though we have strong interests in a lot of conflicting interests in a lot of areas, I think the basic idea is to try to solve coexistence together, and I think that's the main attitude towards it.
Yeah, I fully agree.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you, Lena, Emily, and Daniel again, and thank you everybody for joining. And we hope to see a large delegation of Brits at Vind 2023 here in Stockholm in October. So I'll be sure to circulate the details for where you can sign up for that as well.
Thank you very much.
And enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a nice
Bye-bye.
day.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.